Today's reflection is based upon the 6th chapter of Luke's Gospel, verses 1 to 11. And I've chosen to read from the translation provided by the Good News Bible. Jesus was walking through some wheat fields on a Sabbath. His disciples decided to pick the heads of wheat, rub them in their hands, and eat the grain. Some Pharisees asked, "Why are you doing what our law says you cannot do on the Sabbath?" Jesus answered them, "Haven't you read what David did when he and his men were hungry? He went into the house of God, took the bread offered to God, ate it, and gave it also to his men. Yet it was against our law for anyone except the priest to eat that bread." And Jesus concluded, "The Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath." On another Sabbath, Jesus went into a synagogue and taught. A man was there whose right hand was paralysed. Some teachers of the law and some Pharisees wanted a reason to accuse Jesus of doing wrong, so they watched him closely to see if he would heal on the Sabbath. But Jesus knew their thoughts and said to the man, "Stand up and come here to the front." The man got up and stood there. Then Jesus said to them, "I ask you, what does our law allow us to do on the Sabbath? To help or to harm? To save someone's life or destroy it?" He looked around at them all. Then he said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." He did so, and his hand became well again. They were filled with rage and began to discuss among themselves what they could do to Jesus. The last 2 months have seen the harshest restrictions placed upon our communities since the Second World War. And while there's been some relaxation of the restrictions in the last few days, the reality for many is there's no real change. More than that, the World Health Authority now talks of the world potentially having to learn to live with coronavirus as a feature of our normal lives. So the prospect of returning to our old ways seems uncertain, maybe even unlikely. But changing from old ways can be a good thing. In today's reading and the preceding chapter, Jesus challenges orthodoxy. He eats with outcasts. He carries out activities on the Sabbath. Through his words and deeds, Jesus makes his vision of the world and how one should live in it clear to the Pharisees, the keepers of the old ways, the normal, the traditional ways. But Jesus does not do this out of spite or malicious intent, but because the old and traditional ways were limiting to the well-being of the people, and Jesus wished to bring goodness into the world. We have heard that coronavirus is no respecter of who one is. It's an equal opportunity disease afflicting all alike, showing no regard for one's class, race, gender, etc. But this is not true, for while coronavirus has tragically affected all parts of society, it has had a disproportionately negative effect upon those communities who are already suffering disadvantage. Those that are poorer, those of minority ethnic heritage, those who experience a learning disability, those are just some of the communities that have suffered more greatly. Disadvantaged groups have had the highest infection rates and the greatest death rates. And this greater suffering in these communities has not just been for those who've become ill or have died, it has been for whole communities. I am lucky. I can afford to feed myself. But we know many cannot not afford basic food necessities, and it is a stain on our society that food banks have to exist in a society as rich in so many ways as ours. But what happened when coronavirus struck? Those with means stockpiled food, while food banks were starved of donations and those in food need went without. Today's reading reminds me why it's so important to challenge normal and traditional ways of thinking and behaving. Jesus healed a man's paralysed hand. To the Pharisees, this was Jesus breaking the Sabbath as it was work. But as Jesus asked, is the Sabbath about helping or harming? I wish coronavirus had never visited us, but it has. We have lived with it and will continue to live with it. But hopefully one day we'll be free of it. And when we are, I hope we are more about helping than harming. I hope we can leave behind what has been normal and traditional, by keeping our faith close and finding the courage to challenge what is harmful, and instead act in helping ways. In doing so, make a world where how much one earns, the colour of one's skin, or who one loves does not contribute to whether one lives or dies.